I'm just slipping through your fingers. I lie, but you see that I'm only looking for a reason to burn, to die, to feel more alive. How do I make myself heal if I can let myself in? How do I make myself real when I feel like fading? 'Cause no matter how I try, deep down I'm paralyzed. How do I make myself heal if I can let myself in? If I heal, can I stay or will I fade away? How do I make myself heal? How do I make myself real? No matter how I try, deep down I'm paralyzed. How do I make myself heal if I can let myself in? If I can let myself in. If I can let myself in.
looking for one of those precious moments buried in my thoughts, hoping that I can grasp more than your silhouette and fully remember. I cannot picture you as a whole. There's always something pushing me aside, and the more I relive these scenes, the more I'm pushed away from them. I'm no longer a part of them. I've become nothing but a witness in the mist. I don't want to run out of these memories. I keep telling myself that I'll not forget.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, I guess, depending on where you are in the world. How's it going, everybody? And welcome to the November 21st episode of the SecDataOps, Security Data Operations, our bi-monthly stream where we talk about all things security operations, data operations, and really the convergence of those two in the modern cybersecurity team. I absolutely love that everybody was so into the music. As a matter of fact, I rarely talk about our guest in the green screen, but I totally saw our guest in the green screen just over there bobbing his head. Like everybody was digging the music today. So absolutely loving that we made the right choice. We switched over the music to something a little bit harder. Digging it. Glad everybody liked it. We'll try it again tomorrow for tomorrow's Tea with a Hacker. So, we'll get an encore performance of that as well. Welcome to everybody. Let's hit the rules really fast. First and foremost, there's no toxicity. What does that mean? No racist, sexist, misogynistic, elitist, or otherwise toxic behavior in chat at all. We do have mods in chat who will make no qualms of utilizing that ban button. However, mods are not here to stifle chat in any way. So let's give a huge shout out across all the various platforms for our moderator crew keeping us safe in chat. With that being said, this leads us to our second rule, or really more of a reminder than it is anything else. We love questions. There are very few places on the internet where you get to come and hang out with the massive amount of cybersecurity expertise that we have live here whenever we stream. One of the benefits of these streams being live is that you have the ability to ask and get answers in real time from myself or from our guests, which I know is really why you're here, is for the guests that we have today. And so we encourage questions throughout the stream. Instead of waiting for any type of dedicated Q&A at the end, we welcome the questions throughout the stream. The mods are there. They're grabbing all the questions, and then at some point in time during the stream, they will pop up the questions, and we will get them asked and answered. And so we do always ask that you ask those questions, drop them into chat. We love to have an interactive conversation and keep things particularly interesting to you all. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my guest for today, fellow Twitch streamer, as I found out today. Chat, let's put our hands together across LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, X, TikTok, Kick. We're streaming across Kick today, too. If you're over on Kick, say hi. Noah Hoag, welcome to the stream. Did I say that right? How the hell are you, sir?
I'm good. It's pronounced Hoag.
Hoag.
Kind of with the Y in it. But yeah, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for inviting me onto your guys' show. I really appreciate it.
This is awesome because I didn't find out until you and I were prepping for the stream. You watch the content as well ever since Jason was on last year.
Yep. Yeah, I've been watching it quite frequently when I can. But yeah, ever since Jason was on, I watched his and then, followed you guys on Twitch. And then every time your guys' name pops up on my phone, I at least come in for a little bit.
I love it. Well, welcome not as a viewer today, welcome as a guest. So I'm super excited to have you here. Now you're the director of security operations for BitLyft. You work for Jason?
Correct. Yes. Yep. Director of security, little over a year in the current role. Before that, SOC team lead, and then I did 4 years as a security analyst. Nice.
So we're gonna dive into a lot of that wealth of knowledge on security operations, and share that with the community. I wanted to share with everyone. You can hit that exclamation point guest in chat and get access to Noah's LinkedIn page. Noah, I understand you stream, but was really confused when somebody told me to ask you about dancing on the speakers at Sirens. Is that what you stream on your channel?
No. Yeah. So that is a local to our town kind of club bar, however you want to, picture it as. But yes, I do like to get down on the dance floor. So there's a few stories floating around the office space of, dancing in Vegas, dancing locally at, nightclubs.
Okay, so I didn't plan in the script any form of dancing. Do I need to pad some time at the end for you to dance for everybody? I mean, we've had Jeremy Fisher from our team sing with guitar. We can surely make a segment for you to dance if you want.
I'll pass. I'll save that for later.
All right. Well, enough fooling around. Let's get into it. You know this from watching the stream. We cover a broad range of topics from red team to blue team. And so I was super excited when Jason basically volunteered you to come on the stream and really, have you here to really focus heavily on the blue side. And so with that, I'll remind Chad, we oftentimes talk about, the value of blue teamers and the blue side of the cybersecurity role. So this is a great opportunity to hear directly from that blue team, operator that exists. So let's level set. Let's start by level setting the audience across the board. Talk about what is security operations, not just at BitLyft, but as a job function.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would kind of pertain it to, you have certain individuals that are dedicated to monitoring, detecting, setting up security, whether that's for, like a SIM or your EDR solutions or anything pertaining to securing the network of the company. Having like a dedicated team to that, I would classify as like a SOC or, as a security operations part of a company's day-to-day operations, right?
And so when we think about a SOC, like let's talk about different types of job roles. And I understand this could be vastly, I think one of the things that confuses people is just how different certain SOC teams look in certain organizations. So can you kind of talk about, generally speaking, what should a SOC team look like? What are some of the job roles inside of a SOC? And maybe what makes a good SOC, from a staffing or a personnel perspective?
Yeah, I'll kind of give you a rundown of what I see with, some of our customers when they're implementing their own in-house SOC, and then kind of how we do it at BitLyft, the individual job roles we like to see, right? In BitLyft, we have security analysts. Security engineering is also part of that. So the engineers are more the type to help with setting up APIs or writing code or, doing more of the, like the physical code portion of day-to-day operations, where the analysts are more in the SIM, setting up log sources, stuff like that. Network admins can also be included inside this. I think that's important. There is like the whole saying of like the security and IT are too segmented, right? Well, I like to see at least a network admin or someone that's familiar with the network stack or can, work on the network stack at request of one of the security analysts or the security engineers, right? I think there does need to be a blend there to, cross-team collaboration when it comes to, providing the best benefit security-wise for that company. So that's kind of what I see in, day-to-day SOCs when I'm looking at other customers or ours internally.
Let's break down a couple things too, because I think one of the big confusions really comes down into like a SOC analyst versus an incident responder. Kind of like, what's your take on that breakdown between maybe a SOC analyst 1, 2, 3 versus maybe somebody who's got like a dedicated title of like an incident responder?
Yeah. At BitLyft, we do it a little bit different. All of our SOC analysts are also incident responders. We are a very flat, non-tiered SOC where, they're going to be answering support tickets. They're going to be the first ones on incident response, so forth. But it's not uncommon to have that layered approach, right? I think it is important to also have a layered approach when it's feasible, right? If you have a bigger team, a bigger SOC, having more dedicated individuals that just look at the support tickets or, your SIM or your EDR and making sure those are maintained correctly. But also that incident responder who's very knowledgeable and like, hey, this stuff actually needs to be escalated. This is a true incident, how they have the knowledge behind things like that, where they can provide more insight that maybe a lower tier analyst couldn't have in their current arsenal.
Would you classify, like, one of the things we talk about, one of the questions we get from some of our newer folks who come into the community and whatnot, we oftentimes focus on, like, do I have to go to help desk? Do I have to be like a, help desk person before I go into security? And I oftentimes like to talk about how, like, a lot of SOC analysts, that level 1 or that tier 1 type of support, that could really kind of be that help desk version of cybersecurity for a lot of new folks to go into. Kind of like, what's your take on that? Do you think that SOC analyst is a great place for a lot of folks to be looking at if they're trying to break into cyber?
100%, right? The help desk portion of it really gets their knowledge built up, right? You can throw people in a SOC analyst role, but they don't understand like what is actually going on day to day. How does this tooling work? What are some of the issues that are being brought up to the SOC team to actually figure out? So having that entry point, whether that's as a junior analyst or going into the help desk role first, it gets you that base knowledge. And I think that's super important to have the base knowledge of what is the SOC team doing, right? What are they getting asked to do? If it's, if you're MSP working as a SOC for another vendor, you get the tickets from that vendor to understand like what issues are they having. So I do think it's really important to have that initial input, and that's how we do all of our initial training in our analysts that come in.
So you brought up MSPs, and I do want to kind of make that bifurcation between when we talk about security teams at like a large, Fortune X company, whatever the case is, and a security team, security operations teams at MSSPs. Can you kind of really quickly like talk about the bifurcation? Like, what's life like as a SOC analyst at a private company or an individual company versus like what it would be like at an MSP?
Yeah, this might be controversial, but I think it would be a lot easier for SOC in-house. Like they have the knowledge, right? Where it's like an MSP, and this is something that we struggle with too, is understanding like what is everything that's going on inside that company, right? Because we're not sitting right across from someone that knows, or we're not sitting right next to them, right? So I would say there is a difference, and I have a feeling like being inside the company, being a SOC for that company inside their walls would make things just easier in general to get an understanding of, what actually is day-to-day operation looking like.
So what I hear you say, right, is that like as your role in an MSP, there's a lot of black boxing when it comes
100%.
to having to respond to stuff inside of a company.
Yeah, for sure. It really comes down to one, what they actually feed the SOC team that's not local, and we only have visibility into what they send us, right? If they don't tell us about something, if they don't send a log over that they're not, we're supposed to be monitoring but we aren't, it's like, how would we ever know that, right? We ask those questions to our customers, but it's still, I've had examples where it's like a year down the road, they're like, oh, we also have O365, not just G Suite. I'm like, guys, like, why was this never brought to my attention, right? It's hard to know everything inside a company when you're not physically there.
Let's kind of dive into what makes that hard, right? So, how does a company decide how to leverage an MSP for their security operations, right? Because you mentioned it, like obviously during the negotiations, when you onboarded a client, somehow you would ascertain that they had G Suite, but then ascertain that they had Office 365. Kind of like what's that process like, and how is it that you don't get access to everything that you need to for protecting an organization?
Yeah, I mean, it varies, depending on the certain situation. Like we have those initial calls and we talk to customers very frequently, just to see like, is there anything new that you guys are looking to bring on, log source wise, like SaaS applications, implementing new firewalls, but things get missed. Things do, like they forget to bring stuff up, and it's really on them to let us know. But I mean, we can ask all day long, but sometimes they don't let us know, right? I think it's really important, and that might bring on some other questions, but it's important to keep that asset inventory, that network inventory of what is my company doing, so that way that company can help provide the MSP service or a out-of-band SOC to be able to monitor everything that is actually needed.
Well, let's dive into that network inventory here a little bit, right? Because I think that's like we've talked about. When I say we, the industry all the time talks about like the value of inventorying stuff, right? Whether it's a hardware asset inventory, network asset inventory, we inventory our people all the time, right? When it comes to that, but would you say that there has gotten to be a data problem in terms of knowing where all that stuff is in most modern day enterprises?
Oh, constantly. It's a constant problem. Whether it's, they have one that's, a year old and it just hasn't been updated. Everyone's moving fast. It's not always feasible to have a up-to-date network diagram or network inventory or asset inventory, but it is super crucial to at least try to keep that up to date, right? Because things do get missed. Things get missed along the way. You don't push out things to, via like MDM to devices that you don't know about, right? Things get stood up and decommissioned really quick. Cloud computing, it's hard to keep inventory of what you have and what you don't.
So then like let's walk through maybe like a couple of scenarios, right? So
Yeah.
a client calls you up, they're like, "Hey, holy crap, we've got like something's going on." And come to find out that it impacts some piece of architecture that you did not know about, right? What is the process that you usually go through? Like, how do you get access to whatever that piece of technology is so that you can do that investigation?
Yeah, so I have a really good example
Yeah.
for that. It just happened quite, probably mid-year this year. Is someone had some endpoints that they didn't know didn't have EDR on it, and someone plugged in a USB, and it got
It did
compromised,
what
right?
USBs do.
Yeah, and they're like, "Why didn't you notice this?" I'm like, We looked through the logs. We're like, we don't see that agent anywhere logging to us. They're like, "Oh yeah, I didn't have an EDR agent on it. My bad. Like, let me go install that." So it's like after that point happens, it's like we quickly try to get things deployed, and we're asking like, "Hey, what else do you have in your network that you don't know about? Like, can you go and physically get up from your desk and go over to that server room and look, or go through your MDM solution and find devices that don't have EDR pushed out to it quite yet?" So that's kind of how we handle those situations. It's more of like, okay, this is a very serious moment. Let's go and revalidate that you're sending the right stuff.
And when you come across technologies in the middle of an investigation or in the middle of a response that have critical security data that you don't have access to centrally, how big of an impediment is it to resolving an incident for you to now have to shift maybe some of your processes or how you go about resolving that incident to focus on getting access to those technologies that you need to help the customer solve that incident?
Yeah, I would say it's super important to just jump on that right away, right?
Yeah.
The reason why I think highly of having multiple individuals in a stock room, your security analysts that can, you can branch people off in certain situations like that. Like, you can have 2 or 3 people go in and continue investigation on things that aren't related to that machine, or you can have another subset of people go and actually dive onto that machine, get access to it, or at least have them, the customer, get access to it, share screen, take a look at it, and see what's going on.
So your role then, I take it, like when we think about like SOC director, leading the SOC team, my SOC director that I had at Abbott, he was amazing. I truly was blessed to have him, but he oftentimes kind of became my battlefield commander, in the middle of any incident, somebody that I knew I could always count on to execute a response action. Do you find yourself kind of feeling like that at the same time, where you're like, controlling multiple, kind of battles that are happening in the battle space?
Always, yeah, yeah. I think that's a perfect description of kind of like what the role of a director of the security operations center is about. It's not only the security of the customers, right? Because we got to oversight that too, but it's making sure your analysts and your team is actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that though the workload is spread enough where you're commanding these guys over here to make sure their actions are getting complete. You got your other set of teammates over here doing that. It's very much like a commander on the battlefield, and we reference that all the time. It's like you're sitting there, like I'm on a horse with the shield, ready to go into battle, and I got my analyst behind me, and we do our thing, right?
I love it. And this right here, this is exactly why, like, I was offensive security my entire career, offensive security right up until I went to be director of Abbott. And when I started to pay attention to the blue team and started to do a lot of this stuff, I really had that sense where it's like you're way more out in front, you're way more active in that, that defensive security posture than I think people realize. When we think about, kind of going back to more of like the qualities that make up an analyst and kind of some of the workload that an analyst has to deal with, just generally speaking, I want people to understand the kind of the scope of what it's like to work in a large scale SOC like what you guys do. In terms of alerts, or in terms of incidents, or in terms of events, how big is the attack surface? And I mean that from the perspective of like, how many attacks, if you had to equate it to attacks per day, how many attacks per day do you think on average you see?
Yeah, I would say it depends on how you classify an
Sure.
attack.
Sure.
But I would say we probably like the alerts that we get in that we review have to be probably hundreds that come in that need to be either reviewed or could be potentially malicious, and we just need the analyst to to dive into those a little bit further, right? Um, and to the point of like what kind of like aspects and stuff that security analysts would need. My biggest thing is you got to be willing to think. You got to be a thinker. You got to see some metadata and be like, okay, now what does this actually mean? Is this malicious? Is it not malicious? The easiest thing to do is try to figure out why it's not malicious before you figure out why it is malicious. And so different stock analysts, probably have the same thought pattern, but it's like you got to be able to think critically, but able to be curious at the same time. It's like, okay, what is actually going on here? What happens if this is actually malicious? What's that attack vector look like? Right?
Yeah, let's go back to the attacks really quick because I want to peek. Like you said, two things there that I want to kind of pull apart, separately. When we talk about the number of attacks per day, do you worry about burnout with your SOC analyst on the front line?
No, that's a really good question, because that is one of the biggest reasons why SOC analysts leave after a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is burnout. There is ways to mitigate it, and I think we do a good job at mitigating that. But I've had analysts come to me and be like, "Hey, I need a break. I'm kind of burnt out," and that's fine. Like, okay, go take your break, right? Take a week off.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that the biggest thing to do is really sit down and spend hours tweaking and tuning those alerts, making sure that they're actually firing on the correct things, right?
When you talk about analyst and burnout really quick, I want to get really, really specific on this. What is it? What are the behaviors that you see inside of a SOC that lead to that burnout? Is it because there's too many alerts? Is it because it's high adrenaline and high stress? Is it because you're working 20 hours a day? Like, what are those characteristics that make it high stress in a security team?
Yeah, I would say, at least from my experience, it's not. It can be alarms. I would say that's not the whole reason why they get burnt out. It is more of like customer requests or things that are needed to be done task wise. It's like, hey, we got to get this thing done like tomorrow. Like, we got to build out this dashboard, build out these alerts by like tomorrow. And it's like, it's just the constant work that keeps shoveling into the SOC to be able to build out better alerts, better recommendations, better features out of a SIM platform. That kind of takes a toll on people, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about the SIM platform really quick, right? Because for years, centralization, data centralization, SIMs have always maintained a core piece of infrastructure to every security team. I want you to tell me what's good about a SIM, but I want to challenge you and I want you to tell me what's challenging or what's a con of having a SIM there.
Yeah, I would say what's good about a SIM, and this also might be controversial, this whole segment here, but what's good about a SIM is
we like controversial here. We like controversial.
Yeah, these are just my opinions, by the way.
Absolutely.
A SIM is a very good data lake. Like, it gives you good information to make your logs human readable. You can create alerts off of it all day long, all you want, but it doesn't really solve the main issue, right? It doesn't solve, like, you could have alerts go off all day long for DNS traffic. That's not supposed to happen. But it's like, do you want 2,000 alerts a day on people going to random DNS, or fix it on the back end, right? Go and, make things not go to random DNS servers, point an internal DNS or host your own. I would say the thing that I don't like about SIM, and, it would be that people trust it as a all-in-one tool. It does everything too much, because it doesn't. It is by nature a reactive platform. It is not going to initially stop a threat, because the logs that are generated into the SIM, it already happened, right? Mm-hmm. It's the conversations after. It's what you do with those alerts, like the DNS scenario. Like, okay, we bring that back up to our customers like, hey, how are you guys doing DNS? And they're like, oh, we're just doing VPN traffic, but it's split tunnel. So it's hitting whatever DNS server it wants. It's like, okay, well, let's try to get that fixed, right? I would say those are my biggest complaints about a SIM.
So I like that you called a SIM I don't want to put words in your mouth. So let me try to characterize this. A glorified data lake is kind of what it sounded like you'd said as a SIM. Yeah, you agree with that? So,
Agreed. Yep.
So if I'm also hearing you correctly, you think that most people's view of SIM is it's really, really good at aggregating data, but it doesn't do anything for you when it comes to actually investigating cybersecurity incidents that happen on a network.
I would say it does help you with the investigation, because it does make it easier to be able to do this. Like, instead of going into your firewall and pulling down firewall logs straight from the firewall, you can go into the SIM and look at it in a more human readable format. You can pivot on things. You can search specific metadata fields. It makes it easier. It doesn't solve the solution of your security posture overall, right? It's a piece of the puzzle.
But doesn't it, I'm gonna push you on this a little bit, because again, and just for context for people who understand why I'm pushing on this, right? Like, I've built several SIMs, I've done a lot of SOC deployments, I've done several Splunk deployments as well. One of my frustrations, right, and you kind of hit on it a little bit there, right, is it begets that you have those firewall logs in the SIM, right? But what if cost prohibits you from having all of the data that you need to in the SIM? Yes. And all you get is just the stuff, kind of to your point, that triggers just the alerting.
Yeah, that's a tough one that we discuss with customers all the time, because it's like, oh, we want to log everything. Well, it's like, okay, you realize how expensive that could become, right? Like, SIM platforms are either through EPS volume, their licensing, or through gigs a day. And, we have to be able to, based off of their budget, right, be able to say, hey, this log source isn't really that needed. The security context in it just really isn't there. So we're not going to bring that log in, right? So we have to make those decisions, and they're very educated based decisions of like, hey, we really don't need this log to help you with, lowering your bill or not increasing your cost, because people just can't afford to bring in terabytes a day when it comes to, most of the small business needs, right? So
let's pull on that thread just a little bit, because I love where this is going, right? For those customers that you identify, right, where they do struggle, they have fiscal challenges, they've got a very limited budget when it comes to SIM. Obviously, they're only going to be able to put into maybe what they need to get alerts, to get indicators, maybe to get a few notable events, whatever the case is. But you then still have to have access then to the core technology to respond to any incidents that's there, correct?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, most of that, whether that's through at least most of the communication back to things that we don't have logging into the SIM, would be through API if available, right? To be able to make those API calls back to, like, as an example, block a port or disconnect a port or lock down a device, right? When it comes to like importing syslog sources, like your Palos or your Meraki switches, the regular network stuff, it's a little bit harder to actually go back and help mitigate things.
The reason I go down this thread and I like talking about this, right, is because what I think I want to articulate for people, and I hope that maybe this is something you agree or disagree with, I'd love your opinion on this, right, is security architecture is hard. And it becomes really challenging to pick and choose where you spend your money, where you make your sacrifices to enable your security operations team to be the most effective. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, 100% agree with that. It's a never-ending battle, especially as like an MSSP that has to talk to these customers and let them know, like, hey, like, in order to get logging out of this platform that you want logging out of, it's going to cost you because they don't have the right licensing on that specific product, right? It's a constant struggle. Every day we talk about it. Like, there is not a conversation with a customer I haven't had in the last month that hasn't been about that.
Nice. Let's pivot back over to kind of some of the more personnel-based stuff that we had talked about. When we talk about, qualities and traits of an analyst, you had hit on something that I thought was super interesting. You had talked about like kind of being that curious and having kind of that curious mind. Oftentimes, like I talk about it on stream as being, kind of having that critical thinking or that critical thought process. How hard is it to either find folks who have that or to be able to train folks up on that skill set?
Yeah, it is. It's hard to find it and it's hard to train on it. My way of thinking about it is you get really lucky when you find individuals that have that curiosity mindset. Like they want to know more. They want to learn more. Training that's really tough because it's training, how someone operates. And that's not always an easy thing to do. It's hard to train a person, right? You can train the knowledge, you can train skill sets, but you can't really help train the mind, right? They got to be willing to actually be curious, if that makes sense.
It does, but how do you train it, right? You get somebody fresh, you get somebody new into the SOC, right? To your point, we can send them to certifications, we can send them for OJT and watch over your shoulder all day long. How do you teach them that critical thinking? How did you learn that critical thinking?
Yeah, it would be like throwing your feet in the fire. Really, is how I learned it. It's hey, this thing is happening. Go figure it out. But no, like how I approach it is when my analysts have questions, I don't typically respond back with an answer all the time. I ask them more questions. So it's responding to questions with more questions. So if someone's like, "Hey, is this IP malicious?" I'm like, I don't know. Go look in Google. Like, go check out some IP reputation lists. Like, or they're asking me questions about, "Hey, do you know how to do this in a Linux box or this with EDR?" I'm like, "Have you looked at documentation? Have you looked at this?" I point them in those directions to get them moving, to start thinking curiosity. But I don't always answer their questions directly. I found that has worked pretty well.
What do you say to people who take that mentality and say, well, you're not really helping. You're falling into that try harder mentality. I'm sure you know the try harder mentality that we talk about here in cybersecurity. What do you say to people who don't necessarily agree that that's a very, very constructive way to do OJT with folks on in this field?
Yeah, I would say like maybe it's not a good fit then, right? Because you have to be able to do things on your own. As a security analyst, you have to be able to research, be able to learn, be able to go find tools that work best for you, right? Everyone has their own tool sets. Everyone thinks about things a little differently. I search for like incidents and stuff way differently than one of my SOC team members does. It's because I have found a way that I like to do it. He has found a way that he likes to do it, and they work. But it's that curiosity of like, okay, let me try something different. I might get better results. I might not. Right.
Yeah, I like that. I think the critical thinking thing is the hardest thing to train in our industry, hands down. Like I agree with you on that. It is hard it's hard to bring people along on that journey that creates a true learning experience. What's your I'm going to ask you another controversial one since you like controversy. What's your take on certifications in our industry?
This is going to be extremely controversial. I think they don't mean really anything. I personally don't have a single certification to my name. I think work experience and knowledge is way more important than a certification. Like, cool, you can take a test.
Yeah.
Awesome. Can you actually apply that knowledge, right? Do you actually know what it really means?
When you hire folks, how important are certifications when you're looking at resumes? Does it help you filter people out in that hiring process?
It does a little bit, right? It gives me the idea that they're interested. Like they might have a curious set. They like the idea of cybersecurity, right? But I would not hesitate to take someone that has no certification and is super curious and super willing to learn. That's kind of how we have hired here at BitLyft internally. It's usually straight out of college with just a willing to learn, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Moving on from that, when we think about like progression and whatnot, what's a typical like career progression when it comes to a SOC analyst?
Yeah, the path varies, right? There's so many things out there that a SOC analyst can do. You could go from a SOC analyst to a pen tester, go from a SOC analyst to maybe managing vulnerabilities or managing stuff like that, those solutions. Our typical progression, is even this goes with our dev team, right? Our dev team usually starts as a SOC analyst first. It gets them that base knowledge. But SOC analyst to like a SOC engineer to, SOC team lead, progressing that way, vertically, but it can also progress horizontally. And that's where it comes to like maybe someone's really good at pen testing and that's something they want to pursue. So, all right, let's, get some training on for that. That's kind of my take on it. It's like it can branch out to so many different things. You don't have to just stay a SOC analyst. You can have SOC analyst and then you get your ethical hacker certification. And now you know more about, some of these pen tests that people are doing. You have more knowledge on the tools they're using to help make better alerts.
Yeah. What about so you mentioned a couple things there, and I want to pick on these a little bit. You'd mentioned like some of your devs start out as SOC analysts and then go to developers. How important do you see coding being, maybe as a SOC analyst, in cybersecurity generally as a career? Like, how do you see kind of people's perception of the need to be able to code?
Probably more controversial again. I think they don't necessarily need to know how to code. I think they know how to read code is my big thing. It's especially in the security analyst role. Say someone gets hit with Mimikatz as an example. You want to be able to find the script when we're doing our initial investigation, grab that script and know what it's doing, right? Like where is it going out? What does this piece of code say it's doing after it hits the C2 server? You have to be able to read that. Coding, knowing how to code is just a bonus, right? Because it can help with creating new alerts if they're code based, or remediation actions if they're code based. But I think reading it is the biggest thing, the biggest benefit for that.
What about data engineering, right? We talk about like this massive amount of data. We talk about stuff that's coming into a SIM. SIMs oftentimes have their own query language, right? Splunk has SPL, like, Defender XDR and, Elastic have KQL and whatnot. Like, how about data engineering or database type of skills? How important do you see that stuff needing to be for SOC analyst?
Oh, that's super important. That's basically what you do for half the day, right? Is query stuff. Like you have to know how to read, whatever syntax it is for query language. All platforms have all their own unique language.
Is it
annoying? I wish it would all. It's so annoying. We go to our sim that we host and it's one language. Then you go to Sumo Logic, it's something different. It's like some of them are still using SQL. It's like, you just have to know. It's a tough thing to understand when you're not used to it. But, after you've been through a few sims, you're like, okay, this is, you get your base knowledge of, all right, this is how I query for specific things. But it's super important.
What do you, if you had to pick two, right? Just thinking about like programming and query knowledge, right? SQL knowledge, stuff like that. Which do you think is probably more important on a day-to-day basis for analysts to hone in on?
It would be the searching knowledge, like different search queries. You just have to know it to do your job role, right?
Could not being proficient in multiple search queries slow down an investigation?
Yeah, it can slow down the investigation, and it could also slow down the SIM platform, right? You write very terrible search queries.
That's a good point. That's a good one.
You're going to slow down the back end.
Can you
right?
give an example of that?
Load. Oh yeah, there is a search query that uses OpenSearch on the back end, and if you write a terrible search query, that OpenSearch will error out, and you will get nothing but errors in your widgets. So it's like you're trying to filter on something, you mess up the query, and it takes too long to search. There's no data there in the dashboards. So you got to retrace your steps, redo it all, try to find a very proficient way of searching. And it's the same with parsing out the logs too. You write a terrible parser, it's going to slow down those logs being ingested. And then it's like, okay, why do I have a 30-minute gap in logs or unprocessed logs? It's like, well, the search query is killing it, right?
Yeah, the search query is killing it. You didn't parse it correctly. It's not getting shoved into the indexer appropriately. Now you got to have all the query expertise to be able to query the index, to know which fields you're looking for. Like it feels like it cascades down after a while.
It 100% does.
Yeah. So I love this, right? Because like I think for me, when I got exposed to this and when I started to see this in my teams, it made it feel like we were asking folks too much. We were expecting too much out of folks to protect an enterprise. If you looked across like everything we just talked about here in the last few minutes, the demands on, fresh people coming into security, the need for certain types of skills, burnout and things like that, are we asking too much from our SOC analyst?
Yes, I think we are.
Say more.
There's a lot involved when it comes to a SOC analyst, right? People have the perception that, hey, they're just looking at alerts, right? They're just doing investigations. It's more deep than that, right? They got to know how the back end works. They got to know how the front end works. They got to make sure they don't kill the system doing search queries. They got to know where to look and how to identify like IOCs and how to read these logs. That's one of the biggest things is each log may be a little different, right? A Palo log has similar features, but is a little bit different than like a Sophos log, right? Or a Cisco ASA. Cisco ASA logs are terrible to read, in my opinion. It's like there's minute differences in everything that gets ingested. It's like it's hard to get that all wrapped up in your head and continue making sure things are working correctly. Maybe you're also supposed to be helping with managing your EDR, and then your vulnerability scanner, and then it just cascades, right?
Yeah.
So there is a lot that is on a SOC analyst's hands that they're responsible for, and that might also be a major cause in the burnout. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to deal with.
So let's pivot. Let's tell some stories, right? Because like one of the things that I love about bringing folks like yourself on, right? Especially from an MSP, you have hundreds, if not thousands of clients. You see topologies out the yin yang. You respond to hundreds, if not thousands of incidents and alerts a day. Let's talk about some of the most egregious, things that you see on a day-to-day basis. And again, I want you to be cognizant. Please don't give away any customer information. Please don't talk about anything that could be, potentially lead to any, customer stuff. But let's talk about from a secure configuration perspective. What's probably one of the most egregious security configuration violations, or maybe one of the most common security configuration violations that you've seen at your time at BitLyft?
Yeah, I would say the two most common ones that I'm still seeing since I started and current today is users without MFA, users that have full admin privileges. Like there's no segmentation there, and then terrible EDR solutions. It's no script control.
Whoa.
That's in those.
Terrible EDR solutions. CrowdStrike stops breaches. Carbon Black got bought by tons of companies who are, bought them for their expertise. SentinelOne has got the best EDR on the market. What do you mean terrible EDR solutions? Say more.
Yeah, it depends on how you configure it. I have tested SentinelOne, CrowdStrike with good configuration and bad configuration. Right? It's all about how you set up those policies. You can get ransomware to run on CrowdStrike and it passes. Same with SentinelOne. It's all depending on the policies that you apply to those endpoints.
Let's talk a little bit more about this because I don't think people realize this. Are you trying to say that people spend millions and millions of dollars on EDR and then write policy that makes it ineffective?
Correct. Yeah. It's all about the policy, man. If you don't configure it correctly, then it's basically non-existent on the endpoint.
Why does that happen?
It's misguidance on how to actually set it up. I've configured customers' CrowdStrikes 4 times because things just don't get set up correctly. It's making sure script controls enable. It's just not having enough knowledge. And granted, their operations doesn't sit there to figure out how EDR works, right? They're not sitting there trying to be like, this is not the best policy that it could be. It's just a policy that's default and it works, right? It works. So I think that's the most misguided thing is they just don't have time to set it up, and they're not really specifically there to 100% know how the thing works.
So misconfigured EDR, something that you still see quite frequently. You also said, I think I heard you say prolific admin accounts.
Yeah. Yep. So another big thing is, having conversations with customers. They're like, yeah, everyone has local admin. They can do really whatever they want on the box. And I'm like, okay, well, why is that? Like, why is there no like GPO policies set up or anything like that for your users? And they're like, well, we know that it's set up the way it is, and we're okay with it right now because we don't want to spend time to fix it. And it's like, well, okay, I guess that's fair, right? It just makes our days worse because now we're chasing around things that, if you set it up correctly, did your best security practice there, it wouldn't have to be that much of a deal for a SOC team to go and investigate all the time.
Hold on, Noah. I pay you to keep me secure. Why didn't you tell me why didn't you force me? Why didn't you pin me down and put a chair on my back of my neck and tell me not to give everybody admin access to everything? Why didn't you do that?
Man, I tell you, we do all the time, but it's up to really the customer to implement that stuff. It's how high, their risk tolerance is basically what it comes down to. Like the time to implement things like this and the time to do it. Do they even, think it's important to do right at the, this very moment? There's a lot of misconfigurations that we find all the time.
What else have you seen? What's been some of the what's been the biggest incident you've ever worked?
Oh yeah. The biggest incident that happened, we have a saying in the SOC where October is like scary October. Everything everything bad that's ever happened to incident response wise has always happened in October.
Okay.
This year was our first year without anything critical happening, so we skirted by. But
that means they're going to get you for Christmas.
Yeah. The biggest thing that happened was it was Halloween a couple years back, the weekend after Halloween, and we woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, had two customers on the line. Hey, we just got hit by ransomware. The other company, hey, we just got hit by ransomware. So we're working two ransomware incidents at the same exact time. Got hit with almost identical ransomware, and it turned, come to find out is they didn't know the endpoint that got hit didn't have EDR on it. And then the other was one of their vendors had a full any VPN tunnel into their network.
Oh, wow.
And that vendor got hit, and then it cascaded, across the wire into theirs and compromised them.
Oh, wow.
That was probably the scariest moment. There was probably a 2-week-long security incident bridge between those two companies.
And how much sleep did you get during that 2 weeks?
So it was wake up at 7 a.m., be on a bridge till about 4:35 a.m., get a couple hours of sleep, and right back at it.
Wow. That's nuts. That is nuts. I mean, listen, this is why we say, chat, right? Security analysts, incident responders, like if you work in a SOC, you are the front lines of every company that's out there. Like you are dealing with this. Like this is it. This is as close as you come to battle on a day in and day out basis. Looks like we got a couple questions from chat, Noah. I want to kind of push these up. Some really, really good questions from chat. There's a remind chat to drop those questions in. So Chris says, since Noah had expressed an interest in finding someone, regardless of certs, with a deep curiosity, what advice does he have for those aspiring for a cyber career to get noticed beyond the HR filter in order to be considered for hiring? So really kind of back to that, like if you're, you sounds like you have the sentiment, you don't, necessarily agree certs are the end all be all. How do folks get past that filter if they're coming to look for a job at BitLyft, or if you're a hiring manager?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because that's a hard one to pass. And, I know not everyone is being able to get jobs in the cyber field, even though everyone's saying there's so many jobs out here, right? It's like, okay, people are putting in applications left and right and no one's hiring. I would say take some time and go to like local events. Like there is local, like here in Michigan, that's where I'm from, there is a Michigan SecOps. So they have, their own monthly meetups, stuff like that, to talk to individuals that, maybe own businesses or are looking for individuals. getting yourself out there to these local events, talking with people. I think it's really important to know somebody to get into somewhere, right? If you're having difficulties there, there's a lot of people in the field that are meeting up on a weekly, monthly basis that you can go and chat with and share your knowledge with them, get some information back from them, and just have those conversations.
I'm gonna use this opportunity to do a shameless plug for the 1,000 Connect Challenge. What sounds like you're advocating for is that, like, in this economy with the way things are currently, networking.
100%.
100%.
100%. There's nothing wrong with networking. Like you talk to individuals that are in the space, you can share knowledge with them. I was in the airport when the CrowdStrike thing happened, and I had someone come up to me and Jason and asked us what we were doing, and they had an interest in coding, and they were asking questions like, "Hey, how do I, start doing more research into this or furthering my education to potentially land a job as a coder?"
Yeah.
And so it's meeting new people. They always have good insights.
Nice. This was more of a statement, but I see it as an opportunity to kind of dive into a little bit of question. We were talking about process, we were talking about burnout, we were talking about that stuff like that, and Anita brings up AI. What's your take on AI in the security operations?
Controversial again.
Yeah, let's do it.
I hate that everyone is using AI in their new products. You look at all these products. So we have AI. No, you have a LLM. It's not the AI I envision AI to be, right? I want an AI platform that does, the investigation, the research, actual AI to do things like you look at like Tesla, like the Tesla robot. It's learning. It's not just a language model. The AI portion in cybersecurity is overused. I was at a conference just a few months ago, and everyone at the conference, all the speakers were talking about AI, and people were going past our booth talking about, "Man, dude, I'm so tired of hearing about AI." Like everyone's talking about it. And I get it because it's the same thing over and over again. Someone says, "Oh, we have AI." No, you really have an LLM, which was fine and dandy. Like those are cool. It's awesome to use tools like that. I use ChatGPT every single day. It makes my life better. But the simplified list of steps to secure it, there is things inside ChatGPT where you can toggle some buttons. Don't quote me on how secure it is, but you can turn it off and say, "Don't use my information for training the model."
Yeah.
There's also something on LinkedIn that I learned a couple days back where they pushed out AI into LinkedIn without telling anybody.
Yes.
And you can go and turn that off. So I'd recommend that if you are against AI, to not learn and train on your data. But I would say, yes, it's a good tool. But I also think you have to have the knowledge behind the use of AI. Like if you're asking it questions, it's easier to understand if it's giving you correct output in those language models if you have the base knowledge beforehand. Right?
If you could wave a magic wand and envision what AI for a security operations center would look like, you said one line, but I want you to kind of like dive into it a little bit. What do you think you want out of an AI if you were going to implement it into your security operations center?
Yeah, I would really want it to be able to do the threat hunting portion of it, right? That's one of the biggest tasks for a security analyst.
Can you talk about what threat hunting is so people understand what it looks like from your perspective?
Yeah, so like threat hunting would be going through and looking at logs, right? You have your PAL coming in as an example, your firewall logs, and there's millions and millions of logs a day, right? Surfing through those, trying to find different IOCs or IP addresses that shouldn't be there, the activity that is malicious. If we could have AI sift through that information, generate a IOC report or do action against that, that's the kind of AI I'm looking for, is not using it just to ask questions and get an output, but it's actually learning on the data, doing things with the data, whether that's going out and calling to an API for like VirusTotal as an example and getting back IOC information or abuse IPDB and getting back IP information on if this is malicious or not. and really taking over like that tier 1 security analyst role.
When you say, well, hold on. Before we freak
Mm-hmm.
out everybody, because you said taking over that tier 1 analyst role, is it then your also belief that AI, like, don't you think it's bad if AI takes over the tier 1 analyst role?
I don't think it's bad. I still think there's a human element that needs to be there. And maybe taking over was the wrong term. It's more of like an assistant tool, right? Like ChatGPT is an assistant to help you correlate documents or ask it tough questions on your code and stuff like that. But as like a tier 1 analyst helper, if you will, like making that an internal tool your small security department could use, right? If they don't have a full SOC team, well, now they have a virtual AI that can help them assist with going through day-to-day operations.
Nice. So I'm glad you clarified that. Like because I'm with you, right? Like I think you said what I would agree with, right? Which is that I think AI has a role, especially in that tier 1 analyst perspective. But I would add on top of that I think we want that to happen so that we can have more tier 2, tier 3, senior incident responders, senior threat hunters. We want to raise the skill floor up so that, to your point, that human looking at that result that comes from those AI tier 1s, we've got more experience looking at that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's really getting the mundane task out of the way so that they can work on other things, right? They can be that more intelligence on the incident response. It's like the AI taking over the support tickets and stuff like that come in, where I see that as a way to enhance a security team.
Nice. All right, so rapid fire in the last 3 minutes. What are some of the biggest 3 misses that the cybersecurity industry has had, or that the security operations, just kind of like job function roles had? What are the 3 big misses that have happened this year in cybersecurity?
I would say, from my perspective, it's really licensing on different things, like people not understanding what licensing they need for the applications that they just went out and purchased, or that they do have. Is a big miss, because it leaves you very vulnerable to attacks, right? Mm-hmm. Like think of like an Azure license. There's companies out there that are still rocking the basic, where it's like you can't get conditional access policies until you hit P1 or P2 licensing. And it's like, they come to us, they're like, how come we can't stop these accounts from getting taken over? It's like, well, we can't apply the conditional access policies we need in order to help prevent that, right?
Yeah.
And another miss is the attack surface management of applications, right? Everyone might be controversial again. Everyone is so focused on internal endpoints. It's like the attacks happen way out here. I like to think of it as in like a food pyramid, right? At the very top, most important things, you have your SaaS applications, G Suite, O365, Okta, those. Then you have your middle, your middle segment where it's your Palos, and then your firewalls and, networking switches. And at the bottom, it's your EDR, your endpoints. It's like, we can do everything all day long to protect the internal side, but everything else is getting compromised, out there, right? And so it's like, you got to be able to prevent things first before they get into your fortress, right?
Yeah. Nice. Noah, thank you so very much on behalf of my entire community for coming and hanging out with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I want to give you a few minutes to say something to the community and send us along our way before I talk to my team, about tomorrow and whatnot. So floor is yours, sir.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me on. If there's any questions that didn't get answered, I'm more than happy to answer those if you Slack me on or DM me on LinkedIn. I'm always open to questions, always happy to answer them. I'm also, my big thing is I'm here to help the community also with security. That's a very big passion of mine. So feel free to let me know on LinkedIn if you want to have a conversation.
And if you're looking for his LinkedIn, you can hit that ! guest in chat and get access to Noah's LinkedIn. Noah, thank you so very much for hanging out with me today. I'm going to send you back over to the green room and I'm going to talk to my team on their own, and we'll be in touch for sure. Well, everybody, thank you so very much for tuning in. Wow, we had an amazing turnout. Great guest. I absolutely love, the team there at BitLyft. glad that Jason let us have Noah's expertise for the last 60 minutes to churn through some stuff there. I just realized that I did start the stream about 30 minutes earlier, and so I apologize for that. I was just that anxious to get you the content. I was just really that anxious for you all to get and meet Noah and see all that. And so I apologize for those who were like, wow, Neil started like 30 minutes earlier. Yeah, I realized about halfway through as I was looking at the time clock, I was like, it's like, that time doesn't look right. And I was like, I started 30 minutes earlier. So thank you all for being flexible. Thank you for having the notification turned on so you knew when the stream started. And I apologize for those who were expecting it to be 30 minutes later. With that being said, if you like that content, the BitLyft team, Noah and Jason, they're going to be coming back on December 17th. We're going to be doing, a bi-monthly threat brief. As you can tell, Noah and the BitLyft team, they've got a ton of, knowledge and they're seeing a ton of things on the wire. And so we're going to be providing real-time threat analysis for things that are happening in real time starting in December. Save the date, as Maz put in there, save the date, 12/17, and then every 2 weeks, we're going to be hanging out, talking threats on Tuesday. So make sure you are here for that. We will be doing Tea with a Hacker for tomorrow morning. I was, again, seems to be the week of misscheduling. I thought my scan was Friday. It's actually not Friday. It's Monday. And so we will be doing Tea with a Hacker for tomorrow. And so with that being said, I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow morning for Tea with a Hacker, where we'll be doing our Friday morning AMA. And with that being said, whether you're on the red side or the blue side or still deciding, keep learning. And I'll see you tomorrow.